Morning, everyone. Lovely to see you all on this beautiful but hot morning. We're so thrilled that you could join us today for our Creative Aging and Older Men session. The session, you can see, has been recorded, so you'll be able to watch at leisure afterwards or send it on to colleagues. I was going to say that we are, and I am, this is the Creative Aging Peer Learning Programme. I'm Kate Parkin, the senior officer on the programme, and for audio description purposes, I'm kind of a midlife female, white, brown bob, green glasses, so you'll be able to spot me. Today's session will last about 2 hours, so we finish by 12, and we expect a break about 11 o'clock for 10 minutes to give you a much needed breather. We've got a jam-packed session, so we're thrilled to be joined by speakers, BSL interpreters, and having some great examples of practice. Today we'll be looking at creative aging and the underrepresentation of men. We know as well from Arts Council and Bearing Foundation programme celebrating age from 2017 to 2019 that there was clear evidence that men were less represented within the programme. I think it was about 26 identified as male against about 66 as female, or 64 as female, if you do the sums. So what are the key reasons for low engagement? How does creative choice, partnerships, leadership, health inequalities all play a role? And what actually works in reaching and attracting more men to engage? Today, we're thrilled to be joined by David Cutler, Director of the Bearing Foundation, who's commissioned the report Missing Out to investigate the landscape, identify those examples of strong practice, and explore what can be done to aid greater quality of access. Following David, we're going to hear from some inspiring speakers from across the country, literally from the bottom all the way up to the northeast, from the south to the north. We'll be joined by Balbir Singh, founder and director of Balbir Singh Dance in Leeds, Michelle Kinley Signs, and Jane Wallace, who are from Northumbria and Beamish. Michelle, I think, is head of creative health at Beamish, and we're looking at their men's programs. And we have Mike McGrother, founder, director of Blind Tiger in the Tees Valley, and we'll talk through some of their programs, particularly Infant Hercules Choir, which is established in Redcar in the Tees Valley. And finally, Rebecca Seymour from Celebrating Age UK Wiltshire is going to talk about their Celebrating Age programme. We're also joined by two amazing BSL interpreters, Shelley and Paul. So thank you so much for joining us. If anyone has any access requirements, please just put them in the chat. You can put them as like a private direct message to myself or my colleague Lucy. And also at the end, we're expecting about 15 minutes of questions and answers. So please feel free to put the questions within the chat if you think of some questions during the session, or you can wait to the end. And we're happy for you as well to speak using your microphones. Just put your hand up or just let me know in the chat. But I will, and myself, my colleague, will facilitate those questions. So we hope you enjoy the session. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce David.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much. The first thing to say is thank you to Kate and to Rebecca for this session. Rebecca and we've been colleagues for quite a long time and both very passionate about creative aging. And I will mention I'm an older man, appropriately enough, for this session. I'm also an older man who runs the Bearing Foundation. A lot of you might have heard of us already, but I'll just say that We're an independent funder, much, much, much smaller than the mighty Arts Council England, and we do three very different programs. But one of those is an arts program. Everything that we do is concerned with human rights. So we see, I'm going to adjust horrible, better. We see being creative and accessing culture as a human right. So we know it's a human right that also has all sorts of benefits to society and to the individual, but fundamentally, we're concerned about access to culture and to creativity. Now, that frames everything that we do. We've been pursuing a number of different themes over the years. So a long time ago, we were concerned with arts and refugees, and that's continued with the wonderful work of Counterpoint Arts. Then there was a 10-year programme, and Kate's already mentioned our collaboration with the Arts Council England. We called that Creative Ageing, and I'll come back to that. But finally, to mention that our current programme is called Creatively Minded, and it's about creative opportunities for people with mental health problems. Now, that's people with mental health problems of any age. But it's always interested me that when we look for areas to fund in, many, many, many people will, of course, talk to us about the needs of young people. And everyone knows about the very real increase in mental ill health amongst young people. That's a reality that we've got to be very concerned about. And then they'll also come to us with many fantastic projects, and there are hundreds and hundreds across the country, which are really about people of, I'm going to call it working age, which is a bit of a silly phrase, really. But let's say it's often people up to their 50s. We've never had anyone talking to us about the mental health problems that are going to be present in, for instance, care homes. And I've always found that sort of an interesting asymmetry or an interesting gap in what's happening. And I'll just mention that when you look at people living with mental health problems and creativity, there's a huge amount happening. But in a similar way to we're about to talk about, let's say, people in their men in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, in a similar way, a lot of that work, a disproportionate amount of that work is with women. And we know that men are poor at health-seeking behaviour, but also that men and women have very roughly the same level of mental ill health across the piece. So, in a similar way, we're concerned about ought there to be more activity for men in creative mental health. And actually, one of the examples that you're about to hear, we have funded Blind Tiger for exactly that reason. So I don't think this is an issue that's necessarily unique to creative aging, and we have a publication about creative men's health, and also we gave 25 grants in 2024 about that. But let's turn to the subject of the day and pretend that we can extract those two things. In fact, they're very intimately interlinked, and talk about creative aging. So that would be creativity for anyone who's older, and that's whether or not they have a mental health problem. And of course, we had a 10-year program, and we're continuing to do just a little bit of work ongoing from that, what we call a legacy program about creative aging. And a particular focus in that on people living in residents of care homes. So that brings me to my only visual aid. I apologise. A real copy of uh, Missing Out, which we published last year, trying to just shine a bit of a spotlight on this area. It wasn't the first time that we'd thought about it. So in 2015, we commissioned the marvellous Ed Watts at Whitworth Gallery in Manchester, who did a lovely piece of work called A Cultural Handbook for Engaging Older Men. But we noticed that didn't seem to be a huge amount happening after that, and that was now over 10 years ago. So we just brought together another publication, which you can all see online. The main part of that publication is 15 case studies of good practice of creative aging, particularly targeting older men. Now, normally we are inundated with examples of good practice in the areas that we are working in, and the problem is not including very worthy examples. But actually, if I'm going to be completely frank, and perhaps that's the best way to do this session, is we couldn't find many examples of targeted work for older people, and we'd be very interested to hear about other examples. I'm sure they are out there, but we did all sorts of searches and all sorts of open calls, and the lovely 15 that we've got in this publication is what we came up with, but that in itself was a bit worrying. We've already talked about statistics. It's really hard to find. Kate stolen my thunder, of course, but that's about the best statistic that we could come up with, which was what happened in our celebrating age work. Um, I'm delighted that there's a new publication by research publication by Arts Council England about work in care homes by Rebecca Nesbitt Gordon. And again, my memory is that that found very little in the way of quantified research studies and work with men, and it calls for greater research and more attention to that area. In addition to today's event, we've just been trying to get a bit more discussion, a bit more thought about this. So we've had our own Zoom meeting about this area, and there'll be another one on Friday by the Arts Council Wales in their Creative Ageing Network. We've also given a little funding to colleagues, so there'll be in-person events, and we'll try and find a way to make sure that everyone. You will certainly see those in our arts newsletter, which you can get from the Bearing Foundation as a free subscription. But we're going to have more events in London, which will be in person by London Bubble. We've also funded Equal Arts to have some events in the north of England. And of course, this is an issue across the UK, and we've also funded meetings in Northern Ireland and in Scotland. I've said how difficult it is to look at objective research, but as far as you can see, this may well be an international problem, the lack of involvement of men in creative aging, and the areas that we could research most easily, which were Finland and Ireland, reported similar considerations about fewer men being involved. As Kate mentioned, we've got a very simple call for action in the report Missing Out. I'm not a great one for calling for more research because normally I think it's very expensive and we're tripping over it already. But it really does seem to be an area where there isn't much in the way of statistics, and it's an area where you could have greater research. What we're doing today, I think, is important. It struck me that there was lack of awareness. People, in my view, including when I spoke to people, uh, you have to prompt a lot of arts organisations that we're working with to talk about this. I'm sure that's untrue about everyone on this call, or they wouldn't have bothered turning up. But there's a sort of a bit of a feeling, well, that's just the natural order of things. Obviously, men can take part in what we're doing, and John is pointing out his exception. Good. I'm going to come back to you. As far as I can see, a great majority of arts organisations, and we did do some surveys, were saying that men were underrepresented, which is also in a missing out. Um, so I think awareness is important. Let's just have a discussion. Is it an issue or not in your organisation? And let's just have a little intentionality, a little conscious discussion of that. There's very few organisations that are giving leadership in this area and saying this is an important issue for us. And here's our example. We're trying to disseminate examples of good practice. There does seem to be an issue, and it came up in our report about partnerships between, say, men's groups and arts organisations. I mean, a really obvious one is men's sheds. Men's sheds, very interesting movement. I think a lot of work in men's sheds is already creative, but the sort of arts organisations that are on this call can stretch the ambitions, add to the work that happens in men's sheds, or men's sheds can provide you with people that men who might want to start thinking about the work that you're offering. So, thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to this morning's discussion, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. I'm going to just remove the spotlight, and we're going to hear from Balbir. I just this. I'm going to put the spotlight on so you can see Balbir's face, and also for our other BSL interpreter, which is Shelley. I'm just so we can see Shelley. So she hasn't got a spotlight. That spotlight, so we can see Shelley. That's it. Brilliant. So I'll also add Balbir is the founder director of Balbir Sing Dance in Leeds, in West Yorkshire. I'm going to add your slides, Balbir. I can find there. There you go, there's my share. One second as I open up. I think it's just on a different screen. Yeah, that should work. There, yeah. There you go, Balbir.
Right. Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Kate, for this opportunity to speak as part of this event. I'm so delighted to be here joining the conversation and learning just as much as presenting and talking. I just wanted to talk about a few things and not question or challenge the lack of data from men's engagement, but take a different approach to looking at and thinking about creativity and whether there are other ways and opportunities to engage that plugs the gap, so to speak. So I just want to talk about a few things. and how to cross-reference and also knowledge exchange and cultural exchange as part of the whole thing. So I'll define creative opportunities with how we approach it, and also what is doing an opportunity or an activity in terms of continuing to stay creative, and examples also of how we engage in different ways in terms of sector development. So there are a few things to talk through. So what shapes a man? There is something we've been looking at as part of Northern Man Festival in Leeds, which was a couple of weeks ago, and that was the theme of it. And we took the approach of having conversations around who we are as human beings in a holistic sense, in an aesthetic sense, in that we're not robots, we're creatures of aesthetic pleasure in terms of, oh, that tastes really nice, lovely sunset on the horizon, the color of something one may wear. So creativity in everyday life and little moments is what we try to tap into to build people's inner confidence with who they are, their sense of gentle creativity with how they just relate to themselves, people around them, nature, and the world. And so, what shapes a man was a particular approach that we took. For some, what shapes them is family. For some, it's culture. For some, it's connections with food, with clothes that they might wear, and within all of that is a sense of creativity. So that's the starting point. And so, next slide, unmasking pain. So this was a project, again, very much about expression and finding vocabularies to express, but creative vocabularies to understand and express oneself. So in terms of chronic pain with participants, was very much thinking about what is, you have a frustration with not being able to talk about your health condition, or you're not listened to, or you're not believed in terms of people with Parkinson's and fibromyalgia. We had a phenomenology study done by Leeds Beckett University, so we got the science data as well, but it's very much from a holistic human perspective to try and understand that. And so the approach we took was one of building trust with people to try and engage them creatively, to take them out of their comfort zone. So that is something important that's needed to happen as part of trying to engage people creatively who may never have done some particular activity. So that particular project was trying to find the most appropriate vocabulary for someone to creatively understand and express themselves. But at the same time, the whole social dynamic of being around other people and new friendships coming out of isolation, sharing things and speaking about things they may not have spoken about before through the vehicle of creativity. And so that is an output sometimes. And so, for example, we used clay, sculpting with clay. What is the shape of your pain? Sculpt it, have a conversation with it, dissolve it in water. We looked at colors as a scale of 1 to 10 of activity rather than, oh, I have to draw a paint. I'm not very good at doing that. It's not going to look a good representation of something, that's using colors almost like a 1 to 10 hopscotch board to think about self. Today I'm feeling this color of this shape and this intensity emotionally, as an example of that. So those were ways of thinking creatively to find appropriate vocabularies, and then out of that, creative treatments as opposed to medical treatments, creative treatments, and to give oneself. One may listen to the particular piece of music every day as such, and so that's what we were very much about. How can we provide you with a toolkit to be creative on your own time, and just find the most appropriate ways to connect creatively to understand yourself. So next slide, please. And Northern Man Festival. As I said, we're in the second year with this. The previous year that we were looking at very much about men being reserved and reluctant to express themselves. So we took a creative approach to try to have a soft conversation with them rather than tell us about how you're feeling. And so we took in flowers, and we asked men to hold flowers and have conversations around flowers as to who would you like to give these flowers to, Mother's Day, or receive from Father's Day, or take for oneself. So we documented and profiled the work. So one of the things that hopefully will come across from this is how we document, capture, photograph, create, design material that is engaging, appealing, eye-catching, acceptable, and fit for purpose for dissemination in different ways and sharing narratives and stories. And so we took the flowers to allow men to be photographed holding flowers or hide behind the flowers. And it was the event that took place in the market and Leeds Market, and a lot of market stall holders there. So the purpose of it was to document and photograph, think creatively with color and flower and identity, and then create this visual representation on the large digital screen to let them know what is the purpose in terms of men's mental health. There will be a number of stalls here on a particular day. What came out of that was there was a real richness of conversation with those stall holders, which was really nice to hear, and depth of conversation as well in terms of why are we doing this longer term in terms of support. What we did this year also, we used rice on a table in terms of shaping, just to gently sculpt or trace patterns with. Some stalls people will walk past, whereas with ours as a curiosity, as in what is that person doing with the rice? Come and have a go. So we hooked them in, so to speak, to then have a conversation. So how do you get them through the front door to do an activity or engage? And so creative approaches to do that. The next screen, please, Kate. Thank you. The Oriental Museum is a regular resource. We do a lot of activity with Durham University, which is where the Unmasking Pain project happened. And then they have the resource of the Oriental Museum. We were there this week in terms of, somebody spoke previously about health inequalities as well. And so we did a project with Michelle from Beamish, lovely to see you, Michelle, which was looking at the Bangladeshi community and dementia and the taboos around it, or the lack of acknowledgement of it. And so this week they have a Bangladeshi exhibition. And so again, how do we bring people to a location they may be reluctant to engage? So we brought 2 Bangladeshi members of the community to do a WhatsApp live stream of the activity there to the Bangladeshi community as a gentle step to hopefully get them to come to the museum at some point. So especially with diverse communities, how do you build that trust, and especially with the men, to gently build that connection to eventually get them to where you want to bring them? The Oriental Museum has also been a great resource for us in terms of, it's got a Chinese section, so we did the Chinese New Year celebration in terms of different communities, which was Year of the Horse this year. We've done a lot of activity around Indian dance as a particular focus there. And also we have done a lot of work with staff and staff development in various organizations to take more creative approaches. And so the museum has an object handling activity that they do. And so we looked at creative approaches to object handling. You have different taste buds. And so similarly, tactile feeling with the hands and the fingers to explore how you can touch an object and handle it. And so we put objects in rice, and they had to find their way through the rice to find the object, trace it, and then bring it out to warm up their hands as an activity. And also there was a nice exchange between Beamish Museum staff and also Oriental Museum staff in terms of connecting the two, in terms of staff development and sharing of ideas and ways of working together. So the people that bring people into those organizations to engage in activities. So that's part of the sector development that we do as well. Next slide, please, Kate. Thank you. So nature, connecting with nature is important for all of us. And how do we creatively understand our role and relationship with nature? And so we, as part of the Northern Man Festival, we did some walks for men to engage in Glendale Valley Wood in Leeds. And this coming Sunday, they have a road closure event to close the road, and a whole host of activities. And one of the activities we did with Thackeray Medical Museum was a fashion show, working with refugee communities. They're predominantly female, but we got a nice mix of men as well, older men, to have clothes designed for them. What clothes they like to wear, what color. And so this was a lovely way of performing in a gentle sense with a fashion parade along the road, with a lot of men to have identity, connection, social interaction at the same time. Again, creativity that came out of that, which was really nice. And a lot of what we do is, how can you be creative in your own time? If you're going for a walk, go for a walk in the woods. Sometimes people are told, but how can you do that in a proactive way? And so what we try to do, going back to the aesthetics, is think about sweet spots of your aesthetics to find a place in the woods where you like the sounds of nature, the water there and the birds there, or there's too much road traffic here, so that's an aesthetic moment. Or I love the way the leaves are the light is coming through the leaves, so take that as an aesthetic moment of pleasure creatively in the moment. We do stuff around language in the landscape. How can you see the woods and the trees? So very simply look for letters of your name in branches of the trees. And so again, a proactive approach, and that worked really nicely with the Northern Man Festival the other week with the walk in the woods that we did, just to give them that sense of confidence. And this is, you're being creative in nature, and also there is no symmetry in nature, but how can you make it symmetrical with how you align yourself with the trees or branches? And also we sometimes take cameras with us, and we can get people to use cameras that might be less mobile. We do a lot of this at the Oriental Museum, so they can document activities, so they're still actively engaged, where they may be a little bit less reluctant to get on their feet to do something practical, and dance isn't an easy ask. Sometimes we do find male and female carers that sometimes can just indulge for themselves and not worry about who they're caring for. That was a comment from a male carer. Also, just going back to in terms of what is creativity. So, for an example, with Alzheimer's awareness and light, Forget Me Not Colour Blue, we did a whole activity a few weeks ago in Durham, lighting up Durham Cathedral blue, and also Oriental Museum. And what we did in the museum in terms of accessibility of creativity was we just asked the participants to look for objects with the colour blue. So not to think about countries or themes or subject matter, but just find things of a color blue. And then what the nice feedback that came from that was seeing things you wouldn't otherwise look at in an exhibition. So that made the museum think about accessibility in a new and different way. And again, that was a comment from a male participant in the group. The next slide, please. So the other resource that we draw upon a lot is the botanics, at Durham University as well, with the regular activity there, which is great as again, an outdoor location, a way to connect in different ways. And a lot of our work is about listening, the art of listening to people's insecurities, building that trust, taking them on a gentle journey with where they want to go, especially men. In terms of that reluctance to engage sometimes, and sometimes they're there in a secondary capacity, but how we can integrate them into it in a primary way. And so this is the activity you're doing, but then what is it you can take from this that allows you to stay creative when you're not doing a workshop activity or an opportunity? So it comes back to, is it just about opportunities that we're trying to capture data for, or is it about the impact when what we take from those opportunities into everyday life to stay creative, I guess is the point that I'm making. So David, whilst there may be less case studies there as such, but there is data, no doubt, there in other ways. It's to try to quantify the importance of the art sector and the work that we do across the board. So and again, this was a way of responding. A lot of the work that we do is to bring people to a location and just get them to relax, and we perform to them. They don't have to do anything, have a cup of tea, go to sleep, do what you want to do, leave when you want to, but it opens up a gentle conversation. And the nice thing with Indian dance is expressional and storytelling based and narrative based as a starting point to then reference and draw upon people to gently encourage them in. And this was an activity where we got them to use their phones to photograph what was happening. And again, they were interacting and engaging and gradually building those relationships of trust and finding those opportunities, especially with health and well-being. Next slide, thank you. 2 more to go, we're nearly there now. And so vocabulary, and not to forget artists that are creatively aging, and how they don't get forgotten and they continue to engage creatively. So what happens to them and their knowledge and that knowledge exchange, and also lack of confidence that can sometimes happen with older artists. So sometimes we use the words emerging, established, and senior artist with vocabularies rather than over the hill. In Indian traditions, a senior artist, the words connote a sense of someone who has a lot of wisdom and knowledge to impart and share. And so culturally, it's thinking of those things, and also it's how the art sector, older people continue to engage with what they have to offer and share, and not lose that confidence. And so it's lovely to see, for example, Performance Ensemble and Alan Lydiard continue to engage with his work. Here you have an artist who's 65 plus, who's a rollerblader, ice skater, Olympic level, engaging at the Oriental Museum. And the sense of inspiration and creativity and cross collaboration is important for artists sometimes. And so that's one example. And Namron, contemporary dancer, another artist who was on the point of going to Jamaica and retiring and sitting on a beach, how I encouraged him to engage creatively in activity and be in a performance piece. And it was really nice to him to hear say he needs to do more of that and how that revitalized him. So how do we look at after the older artists in the sector that are examples of that, to share that knowledge and experience? As such, Bashar Kasaka, Liverpool-based, is a Churchill Fellow, and so we've just supported and encouraged an application she's done to the Churchill Fellowship as a fellow to share her knowledge of working in care homes with younger artists, and that has been really inspiring for her and valuing older artists in terms of how do they continue to creatively make work and engage as well and be those role models. And then the stage before that is the transitioning, who will become older artists, so that we can begin to prepare and transition into that to keep that confidence. Next slide, please, Kate. Thank you. And so this is the final slide. So Nayak, this is my guru, Guru Pratapawa, who sadly passed away a couple of weeks back. His last performance was at the age of 83 at the Beamish Museum that Michelle hosted. And so my role as in the Guru disciple and the Indian perspective relationship is not just to learn the art form, but how you keep the older generation remembered and continue to inspire and perform and share that knowledge and that wisdom. And so that is an important element of what we do as well. So that's a whistle-stop tour of how we work creatively in different ways, with opportunity, with activity, with building relationships of trust, but also hopefully what we do to allow people to become more creative in themselves and in their smaller circles. And when they're not doing activity, they carry that sense of creativity into everyday life. And so it's how we learn, how we document that, and how the sector can take examples of what we do, how we work, how we respond in the moment, how we work strategically, how we have a variety of artists and the beauty of the art forms to express, but also bring different cultures together and that knowledge exchange to give them a sense of where we're coming from in addressing the opportunities that there are, but that they may not be well profiled or recognized, and how we can give them more prominence and presence to help show the importance of the art forms. I guess one thing some people say is music, and the importance of music, especially with dementia, is important, and that's acknowledged, and it's had a lot of scientific evidence to back that up in terms of scientific studies. The arts have as well, but they've given less profile with that evidence. So how do we get the arts in general and the importance of the arts, especially for aging, but also as a tool, but also as a way of healthy aging and creativity in the moment, and also across generations in different ways. So that's me wrapped up there. Thank you.
No, thank you, Balbir. That's just a beautiful presentation about your work and your guru. And yeah, it gave a brilliant summary about how you brought men in, particularly are really interesting about the senior artists as well as participants. So brilliant. Thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, Balbir will be probably leaving shortly. But if anyone else, please just keep those in the chat and we can share that, discuss that, and if necessary, feedback to Balbir after the session. Thank you, Balbir. Bye-bye. Our next, I'll show my face as well. See a little postage stamp of me in the corner. Our next presentation and talk is from Michelle Kinley-Sides. I'm just going to make you add a spotlight, and your partner for the programme, researcher Jane Wallace, who is a lecturer at Northumbria University.
Can you see that presentation okay, everyone?
I can, yes.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much, Kate. Yeah, we're going to share the presentation between us, Michelle and I. And Michelle, as you just said, is head of health and wellbeing at Beamish Museum, open air museum in County Durham, and I'm a professor at Northumbria University in the Design, Arts and Creative Industries School. And we're going to share examples from a project that we've been running together since 2024, but talk about a much longer collaboration that we've had that goes back to 2017.
Okay, you're in charge of the slides, Jane. Thank you. So I'll just very quickly introduce kind of what Beamish's Health and Wellbeing team does for those of you who don't know. So we're based at the museum. We've got our own amazing space in the 1950s team with our own fully accessible house, garden, workshop. You can see the workshop there. A lot of people assume that we do reminiscence, which isn't wrong. We can do reminiscence and it's all around you at Beamish, but what our team focus on specifically, and we've grown to do more and more over the years, is this focus on creativity and meaningful activities with others. So we have now a weekly programme of activities which uses the museum, the spaces, the collections in lots of different ways. So we have walking groups, men's sheds, which David mentioned earlier, and we have 2 of those every week. We have a music and movement session. Thursday is our pottery group with Jane, and Friday we have another walking group, and community groups can come and use the cottage. So really busy little team. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to kind of give a brief snapshot of the kind of work that we've been doing, and this has all been couched in creative research practice. We started working together with a PhD student in 2017, Jill Brewster, who worked with the men who follow that men's shed model that Michelle's just mentioned, and focusing on woodwork and teaching how to carve. And now a lot of those blocks that are carved by the men using artifacts from around the museum as inspiration are printed onto bags that are sold in the Beamish shop, and that funds a lot of the resources for that project. We also ran a project that was led by Henry Collingham called Dovetails. That was an intergenerational reciprocal making project between the same groups of men and a young person's charity called Kids Cabin in the Northeast. And the groups made things for one another throughout COVID and beyond. And then the centering project that we're going to focus on today is a pottery project. We've won an award now through the Dementia Award 2026, that you can see the circle at the top there. And we're going to focus on some of the ways that we work, what we'd expected the group to be, but how that's changed and adapted, and how some of the men within the group are helping to run what we do now.
Thanks, Jane. Our pottery group, as you can see, is all men, and actually we didn't specifically set out for it to be solely for men. It kind of emerged because our weekly programme, I would say about 70% of people who get signposted to us from occupational therapists, link workers, Alzheimer's Society are men. We had a lot of men on the waiting list. So following on from the success with Jane and her team, we thought, let's give this a try. And it meant that a lot of men who might, or we felt and they felt, would struggle in our other men's group due to perhaps challenges with communication or their support needs or kind of the pace of things. So this group, the centering group, is all men between the ages of 50 to mid 80s, I think. or with brain changes. So some of these men are living with dementia, different types of dementia, but equally it could be the result of a stroke or a head injury. But what brings them together is they all want to do something meaningful. They want to be with other men. They want to be part of it, be part of a group. And as David mentioned earlier, in relation to people living in care homes, just because you're living with an illness that affects your brain or such as dementia, doesn't mean that's the only thing. You will also, all of these men have been experiencing social isolation, huge change in relationships. So anxiety, depression, really kind of low mood, quite frightened at times. So this group brings them all together in our brilliant workshop, which you saw earlier. Oh, I just thought, James, you want to explain why it's called centering?
Yeah, so we called it that because of the activity of centering clay on a wheel, something that can kind of pull in your focus and give you something very embodied, to take your attention and to bring you into the center of something. But also within therapeutic practice, it can be a way to actually just calm oneself, to bring oneself to a focal point. And that marriage between thinking therapeutically as well as the creative side of what we're doing felt like it was the right description and title for the project. And to begin with, like Michelle said, we'd got a number of expectations and things we wanted to try to achieve, to use a lot of the environment of Beamish, the heritage objects and skills that live in Beamish that are taught to visitors and that are being taught and learned by new staff within the museum all the time, especially with a new pottery being built very close to when we started this project within Beamish. So we wanted to draw on those heritage foundations that are part of the place. And we wanted to create a way that we could build a creative confidence in people and to help people discover new talent. So learning new skills was definitely something that we were led by with this, but being led by each individual to see what their skill set actually was and was going to become, as well as it being somewhere that could feel like a safe place that people could talk about their lives outside of the group if they wanted to. It's not something that we ever purposefully direct in conversation, but it does come up depending on which men are in the groups, and people will want to talk about their dementia. And so there's a space for that as well. We hope there'd be a lot of joy in what we did, and the embodiment of clay, we know from other work and a lot of the work that I've done before and with other groups, there's a really kind of low threshold to access. So it's something that you can start to make pieces just simply with your own hands. There isn't a huge amount that you need to get started, and then we can build skills and techniques in complexity from that point onwards. So the things that can work for everybody. We thought potentially it would be a space where we could help people build resilience, and which we were thinking of coming from being in the group as well as acquiring new knowledge and learning new things. Yeah, and the museum, its buildings, as well as its archive, as well as just the environment, the vibe and the feel there, as something that we could really harness in what we did. But it's become a lot more than that. And we work constantly changing what our processes are to adapt for each individual within the group. We normally have a maximum of around 6 people in a group. That's kind of a manageable number, and everybody might be doing something very different in a session. And a good example of kind of adaptation, I think, will be just to mention Nelson, who as a young person, when he developed a very rare form of dementia, and it has affected his depth perception, his language center. So his use of language was very limited, and his use of tools and dexterity was affected. But we were able to kind of learn with him what kind of worked and what we could do, and built a purpose-built kind of a kind of personal table, really, that he could have very close to him. So even if things were dropped, they would just land onto this kind of tray like table. And we found that if he was having a sensory input with both of his hands, that at the same time, that really helped him. So adapting tools that could help him add colour onto pieces, and found that his ability with colour was just exceptional. And the other members of the group were saying to him that they really liked what he was doing with colour as well. And that gave him such a boost, and something he'd never known about himself. He'd been a scientist previously, and so this was a whole new facet to himself that he was finding out. And we were in danger, really, of everybody asking if Nelson would paint their pieces. So we had to kind of stop ourselves from doing that. But I think that was a real boost for him. But it kind of, we got to that point through lots of adapting how we worked to understand what would work best for him. Okay, I'll move on. I said a lot
there. So this is an example of some of the early things that the group made, as well as the bowls that were in that picture. So we made forget-me-nots that we turned into badges, and spoons as well. So this was a mobile that we had an exhibition that we'll talk about in a minute. But these two things show how everyone could work together collaboratively. There was, on some weeks, a bit of a production line. Some people did the rolling, some people did the cutting, some people did the sticking bits together. So it, like Jane said, it was finding ways that everybody could join in and work together, I think, help one another, and to see such brilliant final pieces as well. These two items, the spoons and the badges, we've also been selling. We've sold at the museum, in the gift shop. We have a shop in Durham now as well, and they sell like hotcakes. They are so popular. We all wear the brooches. That wasn't ever something that we decided straight away, right, it must be a production line, we must sell these things. It was more about, I think people would buy these, and it just adds another layer of kind of meaningfulness, pride in their work, that people are actually willing to part with their money to buy something that they've made. And we're still churning out the badges. We don't make the pottery group do them all the time, but that's not as fun. But yes, they still, and because of the story, the context behind it is so valuable as well. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you. And we're going to mention a project, like a sub-project that we ran within the bigger centering project that is ongoing, and longitudinal, the centering project. It happens every Thursday. I should have probably mentioned that. And it started in February 2024. But this smaller, shorter project was a 12-week project that we called Clay Connections. And it was a reciprocal making project between our group at Beamish and a group of 6 people from Chile Studios, which is a mental health arts charity in Newcastle upon Tyne. And they also have a they do loads of wonderful things, and they also have a ceramics space within their charity. So there was a lot of synergy and wanted to do something together. So we developed a project where those objects that you can see on the left are a design method called design probes that you can make in a myriad of ways, small objects that ask questions and give a creative space that people can respond. So these were ways that people could share things about themselves. So we asked everybody in both of the groups to use these objects and express who they were. So we asked about favourite foods and favourite places, idiosyncrasies about them, funny experiences that they'd had, their favourite aesthetics, those kinds of somewhat direct questions, but there was still enough scope for them to take it in all kinds of wonderful directions. And all of these objects, once completed, fitted inside an envelope, and they were handed over to somebody in the other group. So people in both groups hadn't met at this point. They just responded to these objects, and then they received an envelope full of all of this magical information about another person. And then over 12 weeks, everybody in both groups, separately in their two groups, made a dinner setting for their person. So a plate, a side plate, a bowl, and something to drink from. And what we're going to kind of share kind of explains some of the things that happened within that we think were very profound. You go, Michelle.
Thanks, Jane. So yeah, I mean the pictures speak for themselves. They're beautiful, and I think they show really well how the communication wasn't just reliant upon language, especially for our group, because we knew language was a challenge for some people. So even the plate that you see in the middle was by Nelson. Just looking at that, you understand that he feels close to another. It's the friendship handshake. He feels like he's making something for a friend, and they all felt it was really beautiful to see, especially for people with dementia who often are, recipients of care, sympathy. People assume their brain isn't working. People were holding another person in their mind while they were working, even if it was for a little bit and then they moved to something else. Every week we looked at the design probes, what we were doing, reminded ourselves of the person that we were working for. So yeah, it was a beautiful way to express ourselves and our thoughts about other people through creativity. Some men as well we were helping them, guided by them, to push their boundaries. There was one man, for example, who had been a draftsman all his life, absolutely loved straight lines, precision. So getting him over the week, we didn't force it, but to kind of look at more abstract shapes and marks and things. And they said we really liked pushing ourselves a little bit. Like when one man was making a plant bowl because he said, I know that my person really likes plants, and that's massive. That's massive for both groups, to think of another person while you yourself are dealing with a lot. Definitely. And also, this is a little bit gendered, but I'll say it. Men aren't always the best at expressing themselves, their emotions, but this was a great way for them to do it. Thanks, Jane.
Thank you. Yeah, and then once the pieces had been made and fired and completed, the image on the left shows everybody came together at Beamish, and everyone got to meet their other person. We'd planned to have a big meal together around a big table, but similarly to why we didn't organise the project in a way that everybody met up front, we decided not to have that social pressure of the meal table. We had a big buffet instead, and people could be in small clusters and do things in a way that felt comfortable for them. But there were really significant things that happened for people on that exchange and that meeting, and people feeling like, as Michelle said, they'd built up a relationship with their other person over the course of these 12 weeks. They knew them to a degree, and the conversations they were able to start having were facilitated by that underpinning knowledge and sense of closeness that people had. And there were lovely things where people could see that they'd kind of picked up on similar things about each other, and pieces in both sets for some people felt like they really fitted well together, and that gave them a really boost, a really kind of key feeling of validation and having successfully understood somebody else, which is huge for both groups. Some of the people from Chile Studios have developed this now. Casley, who you can see in the picture on the left-hand person, he's now supporting a PhD student as an advisor in her project. Somebody else has taken what he's done in this project into his therapy and using it to kind of see how his social gaze shifted from himself to another person. And friendships were formed, and some people have stayed in touch. You can see on the right, we curated an exhibition at the university of the project and the wider centering project. And I think that was important for people to see their work in such a context and to see these stories in such a context. I think it really gave people a sense of pride and validation. And it was something where families could come, and for spouses and partners and family and friends of everyone in both groups, I think it gave a really particular, uncommon lens to their person than they're used to see. We know from our conversations when we meet the men's wives at the end of each session, how things are going for them. And it's unusual for them to see, wow, my husband's made this difference to somebody. He's really impacted somebody, has he? And look at the quality of the things that he's made. There's something really important that was going on there that spread out into a wider social context. Okay, I'll hand over, Michelle.
Oh, thanks. I'll just talk briefly about this because then we've got a lovely little video, which is, I want to make sure you get to hear that. This is an example of kind of a different approach to evaluation. So this was a pot made at the end of the project by the Chile Studios group, but all the words on it are from comments made on the day that we swapped things over by both groups. So Jane kind of had it interviewed, recorded conversations between the partners, and then Chile Studios made this pot. And I think it's really evident. The first thing that you see is they felt like me. And I think the size and the position of these key words really kind of demonstrate the impact that this project had. So this was in the exhibition as well. And I think it's a really good way to demonstrate for both groups, I matter, you matter. It's a beautiful part, and it shows growth as well. And that's everything was thought really carefully about that part.
Great. So we're going to give the final word to Casley. And this is him performing a poem that he'd written about what it had felt like to be partnered with Nelson and to make pieces of work for him over the duration of the 12 weeks.
We are not broken. We are not broken, just changed. Our value never diminishes. Our connections never cease. Hands are not the only way to reach you. Words are not the only way to speak. Exchanges can be fleeting, yet live with us forever, gently touching to our cause and pulling us together. We are not broken. We are linked, not by chains, but with ribbons, not tied tight and restrained, freely bonded through living. Humanity can transcend physicality. Our auras can traverse this terrain. We are not bound by convention. Silence has so much to say. We are not broken, and nor will we ever be, still profoundly affecting strangers and being felt by friends and family. We are not broken. We are not fixed, but we are moving. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jane. That was very moving and extremely beautiful way to end the session. It was just, I was just thinking it was just the right kind of like level about engaging and with men on their terms, and really sensitively done, beautifully shown. And I really personally loved the different take on evaluation at the end. It's very creative and very fitting. I'm just conscious of time, so I think if we stop for the break now, and then we'll meet back at 11:15, everyone. So that's 11:15, and we'll be joined by Mike McGrother from Blind Tiger. Thank you, and see you very shortly. And I would like to welcome back. Have we had a chance to get a cool drink on this very hot day? I'd like to introduce Mike McGrother from Blind Tiger, who's going to talk to us about some of the projects that you've undertaken and a little bit about the work happening. Thank you, Mike.
Hello, everyone. I've written a script, but I'll try and keep it slow, as instructed. Hopefully, it'll keep me into the 20 minutes. And if there's time within that, I've brought my guitar, so I'll sing a song. So I'm Mike McGrother, founder. Well, I'm described as many things in Teesside, some good, some bad. Founder and creative mischief maker behind Blind Tiger, which is a community interest company in Stockton-on-Tees. I'm based in Ark in Stockton. Blind Tigers were the speakeasies that appeared during Prohibition, which still allowed people to have a drink, share stories, and sing songs. They were also called Blind Pigs, but Blind Tiger seems just a little bit more brand friendly. Our mission is to reconnect men and their place through a spirit of community. We deliver activity, but more importantly, we create spaces and places where men can connect, where they can realise their role in society, learn together, become more active, be more enthusiastic, laugh, give of their individual and collective skill set, and find ways to communicate messages about health and well-being across their community, mainly by sharing their own personal stories. We try to help men remember that they really matter. There's two main strands of activity. One is Infant Hercules, described by some as a choir and others as an anti-choir of men, and the PALS, which is a social action group described by the Women's Institute as the male equivalent of their movement. Our activity is based on story and storytelling, but today I'm mainly going to focus on the choir, Infant Hercules. Stories are really important. They're the things that connect us. So here's a little bit of mine. I probably inherited my passion for what I call community engineering from my granddad, Jimmy. Granddad was born in Middlesbrough in 1895. He was a riveter working in the shipyards and foundries of Teesside, and his first job was to build the transporter bridge. Well, please don't blame him for the fact it's now fallen down. He wouldn't know anyway. Grandad Jimmy died in 1968, the year before I was born. Somehow my dad said I inherited Grandad's ability to connect things, not the bits of metal he joined together during the day, but his workmates drinking in the pubs of Haverton Hill every night. Haverton Hill was, at the beginning of the 20th century, a community made up of born and bred Teessiders and immigrant workers, mainly from Ireland. They worked well together during the day and generally ended each night in the pub with a fight. Jimmy was a peaceful soul with a voice and a manner that people on both sides of the divided pub seemed to like. He was known as the Lark of Haverton, one of the many renowned singers and comedians in the emerging place that became Billingham. Jimmy would jump up on the pub table or bar, sing a song in English, then turn to the Irish and sing a song in Gaelic. And somehow he'd then take the English song and the Irish song, merge them together, and the whole pub began singing and dancing. They would go home smiling, singing, and as friends. In 2013, I got a phone call from the Theatre Royal in Newcastle. They'd been commissioned for the Festival of the North East to create a choir of men in Teesside, inspired by our iron and steel industry. And they contacted me, and I remember them saying, we understand you're the man who creates choirs for people who can't or won't sing. And they're right. At the time, I was running a choir of the refugee community in Stockton, combined with people who lived in Stockton all their lives. And we used to sing and laugh together and create what you could call a choir. They said we wanted to create a choir of men. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, especially when they told me the fee. And I said, what do you want me to do? And they said, we will find you the men. You will get them to sing. So for the next couple of months, I sat in a working man's club in Redcar on my own, and no one would turn up. Because although I thought it was a good idea to create a man's choir, the Theatre Royal thought it was a good idea to create a man's choir. Festival of the North East thought it was a good idea. The men of Teesside didn't. So I was the clock was ticking, and I had less than 3 months to create a choir to perform at a festival event in Redcar. So in desperation, I said, can I move my operation to my hometown, Stockton, and I will find some men to sing. For the first couple of weeks, again, no men came. So then in absolute desperation, I put a post on Facebook saying, there's a free bar on tonight, lads. Why don't you come to the pub and sing with me? And out of nowhere, 6 men arrived, and they had a great night, and they had a good drink, and we mumbled through a few Football Terrace songs. And then I said, right, if you liked it, bring someone next week. And within 3 weeks, we had 15 men, and we learned 6 songs. We commissioned a song, again funded through the Festival of North East, which was called Infant Hercules. Infant Hercules was the term given to Teesside in 1862 by William Gladstone, who described us as you may be the youngest of England's enterprise and an infant, but you will become an infant Hercules of the world. And we went on to build bridges and connect the world with our iron and steel. We did a spectacular gig in Dormanstown near Redcar. There was 15 of us on stage, and around about 12 in the audience, and a ferret. And at the end of it, I said, thank you very much, lads. That's the end of the project. And they said, what do you mean project? I said, well, that's what it is. And they said, no, it isn't. We are a choir. We are Infant Hercules. And that was 2013, and I've been stuck with them ever since. So I had to find a way to kind of keep involving them in singing and equally within the community, because that's what they seem to love. So in 2014, we started 5 years of activities and events inspired by stories we'd unearthed as a commemoration of World War I, the 1,245 men who died from Stockton-on-Tees. Each year we did a different project, and each year we sang with different groups of people. We created walks and campfire song sessions inspired by mental health and addiction stories. We created a family festival with young carers and looked after young people inspired by the creation of the National Adoption Service after World War One. We created speakeasy sessions in pubs and residential homes, reconnecting bereaved older people, mainly men, and allowing them to sing and tell their stories. And finally, we created a large-scale light and sound installation by working with the inmates and staff of Home House Prison, reminding people that remembrance needed to be about the whole community, even the ones that quite often we choose to forget. That installation took place in a large derelict church and was accompanied by 1,245 singers, each representing the life of one of the soldiers, but led very much by Infant Hercules. So, yeah, I'm looking at time. Each event or gathering attracted more men to the group. I started to reflect on why it worked, because I was just making it up as I went along. Until 2018, we'd sung songs that told stories of the individual projects, and to be honest, any song that I thought might sound nice, and that which was difficult because most of the choir couldn't sing, but it didn't matter. When I asked the lads what worked and what didn't work, they explained that it was the songs about real people, real places that made them sing, as one member said, what Dennis said, with a puffed out chest and Teesside pride. So I set about finding songs that were of our place and uncovered quite an endless compendium of songs from writers like Graham Miles, who'd written songs about our river, our railways, our town centres, our iron and steel. Ron Angel, former chemical plant worker, who'd written songs about his life working in ICI. Vin Garbett, the Teesside troubadour, who'd sing songs about real people, often the marginalised people in society, and about his love of the countryside of the Valley of Tees. They're all Teesside men whose songs told stories that resonated then and still do today. Songs of the head and the heart, folk songs, songs about folk, stories that land and that tell our collective story, history, her story, our story. And we found that as we sing other people's stories, we start to realise that our story is important. And so we sing and tell stories about our struggles, our issues, our lives. The men have become producers of art, producers of content, but more importantly, they feel better. Infant Hercules is now 120 strong with a weekly attendance of 80 plus. We joke that before long, we're going to need a bigger pub. We use Facebook Live to enable some of the men who can't attend for whatever health reasons to still join in rehearsals. And the age range of the choir is 21 to 79. Importantly, although the majority, I would say 70%, are over 60, the one thing they don't want to be seen as is an older men's group. We are a group of men with disabilities, men from different cultures, men who are neurodivergent, men who are wealthy, men who can't read, men who are lifelong members of the Conservative Party, men who are trade unionists, men who drink, and men in recovery from alcoholism. They're just men. They enter the pub as ordinary men, but something magical happens. This resonance happens to do with the songs, the stories, and the pub itself. And they realise that when they leave, they realise they are in fact extraordinary men. Ordinary plus ordinary equals extraordinary. We're now trying to expand up the East Coast. I don't quite know how I'm going to do it, but we have men travelling 20, 30, 40 miles to come to Stockton each week to be a part of Infant Hercules. I think Grandad would probably have loved my choir. Actually, he's probably why it's even here at all. We never met, but through my dad's stories, I carry on Grandad's work. This is his, my dad's, and my story. I used to ask me dad, what do you do all day? It's riveting, he always laughed. Then he turned away. What's riveting, I said. Here was a child just full of wonder. He said, it's a life I lead that smells of oil, sounds of hell and thunder. He used to take me out on a Sunday. He'd always wear a suit. The conversation didn't flow. I talked, but he was mute. I'd point up high through smoggy sky and ask him of the creatures. And like swans, they'd stare back down on me with melancholic features. Then me and me dad would go back home. Me and me dad would go back home. We'd wander past the middle house. He'd hum mountains of morn. He claimed he'd sung there every night till all of us were born. I once asked him why his singing stopped. He never said a word. But me mum said he said, like a lark, the sweetest voice she'd heard. Then one day Dad picked me up from school. I thought it kind of odd. He was stood there in the playground, looking awkward on his Todd. I asked him why not riveting. He said nought, but held me tight. And we walked up Hope Street to the docks till day turned to night. An age went by in silence. Then my dad started crying. I didn't ask, I didn't dare. He said, the port is dying. He pointed up with big wet eyes and said they broke their necks. And the crane stared back and I cried too, a shipyard full of wrecks. We took his bridge back home to Suffield Street. There was our mum waiting. I thought she'd go right off on one, 'cause lateness was a hating. But she sent me off to wash me hands and said, let's have some tea. For Penny have some peas and cheese, fresh bread and jam for me. And then I asked me dad, what will you do all day? He said, son, I have to go away. So now I'm waiting for me dad to come back home. I'm waiting for me dad to come back home. And that's why I do it. Thanks to Grandad. Thanks to you. I'll still keep making it up as I go along. Thanks to the Bearing Foundation who really helped us massively. We were able to go across Teesside, and the Arts Council as well who supported us. So yeah, there we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. That was brilliant and so inspirational. There's been lots and lots of chat.
Oh,
You'll have to read.
get him on.
Get him on. Get him on. Oh, I think many of them were just saying how brilliant and inspiring it was. And it's just great to hear about the project, the roots of the program, and how actually it grew over time by word of mouth, but with the help of a free drink initially in the right space for them.
Yeah, I mean, I should say two things. One is, like, for the first 8 years, it wasn't ever really directly funded. It just happened. I couldn't get, they just kept following me around. And that sort of helped it grow, really. It became its own thing because it wasn't funding dependent. And the second thing I should point out is the biggest selling drink in the pub on a Thursday night is Guinness Zero. So it's not about coming for a drink at all. It's something else, which I can't quite put my finger on, but it's about the sociability of the whole thing, I think, and the fact that they can feel normal, and particularly some of the lads who can't drink anymore, that they say it's a way that they can come to a pub, which they wouldn't be able to do normally, and just feel normal and ordinary and part of a community. I'll shut up now.
I'm on mute. So thank you so much. That's brilliant. I'm going to just take off your spotlight so we can talk to you at the end. I think everyone really enjoyed that. And we're going to be joined now by Rebecca Seymour. If I can get the right. We have two Rebeccas on the call. There's Rebecca. I just added so we can see Rebecca's lovely face. Hello.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you. So I can share my screen. Is that right?
You can. So if you press the share button at the bottom.
Yeah. And then I need my window. That's it. I just need to make sure that I can find my presentation. Do I just need to share entire screen?
Yes, that's it.
Okay. There we go. And then I should be able to find my presentation.
That's beautiful. We can see it. So if you just go to slideshow.
Yeah. And I'll start
from beginning.
Yeah. Lovely.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. All right. Thank you, everybody. Is that fine? Can you see? I can't see anybody, but I can see my screen. So
yes, we can see it.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Rebecca Seymour. I'm the creative producer for Celebrating Age Wiltshire. We're a partnership of various organisations that you can see on the screen. And we started off in 2017 with Celebrating Age funding from Baring Foundation and Arts Council of that Celebrating Age funding. And it was to deliver a real variety of arts, events and activity for older people across the county in Wiltshire. And after 3 years of Arts Council funding and a great report from Nell Farrelly, our external evaluator, we then went on to receive National Lottery funding for 5 years. So just to give you a little context of Celebrating Age Wiltshire, as I said, it's a partnership of arts, heritage, cultural and community and support organisations. And we're working together across the county to support older people's wellbeing through arts and heritage, daytime events to make them accessible, local community venues all year round. Our main aims are to reduce social isolation and loneliness, enhance the wellbeing through creativity, and also increase knowledge of the other services available that people who attend our events can then go on to access. So one of our key things is about supporting people to tap into other services that are going to support them in their older age or with health benefits and support. So specifically, I'm going to talk about the strand that we work on called Creative Conversations. And this really came about initially because we were awarded the National Lottery funding in March 2020. So celebration, yes, of 5 years funding, but couldn't do anything that we wanted to do in terms of bringing lots of older people together in community settings to enjoy the arts. So we had to really think about during lockdown what we did instead. And after me joining endless sort of seminars and chat rooms across the country of other people deciding what they could do as well, we started our creative conversation strand on the telephone. And all these isolated older people that we worked with were referred to us from social prescribers, community connectors, their own families, once people had started to hear that our artists were working on the telephone, as many other artists were across the country.
Rebecca, can I just jump in? Just having a miss in the chat. Could you just click on the From Beginning screen button at the top? And then we can be a bit bigger. It's just so we can see all of it. Yeah, I think that's it. That's it. Lovely.
That's better. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. No problem.
Yeah. There we go. So yeah, we then, after lockdown eased, we started to go into people's houses to do those one-to-one sessions. So an artist would work one-to-one with participants in their own homes and produce whatever was relevant to that person. So it was multi-art form, and those creative artists were paired up with a participant with their interests. And so we created all sorts of lovely things that they then went on to share with their own families. But after that, over the 4 years that we developed the Creative Conversations, we started to work in libraries and develop creative conversation groups, so that people were starting to come back together and would meet in libraries. Wiltshire Libraries are one of the partners in our project, and as everybody who's ever done anything in a library knows, it's such a great space. It's very welcoming, it's very familiar, and it's safe and supportive. And the library managers are fantastically supportive, and they're volunteers for us and making our groups work. So after we'd done those 4 years worth of groups around the county, we really noticed, of course, like other people have said, that it was predominantly women, older women, that were coming to these sessions. And there were a few men, but particularly men over 65 were not necessarily attending our groups. So we started to do a bit of research, talked to our social prescribers and community connectors that we were working with, and discussed how we could support older men. So we just, I mean, a lot of this has been said. So, you know, as I said, more women than men attend our events, and we tried to sort of work out what it was that was happening, particularly because we're working with older men that at least in their 70s, 80s, but also some men in their 60s who were starting to lose their social skills often to do with retirement. We talked to an awful lot of older men and worked with Age UK Wiltshire to understand that a lot of men, when they leave their job has been their social circle as well. And they tend to step away in retirement and not necessarily keep up that social time that happens after work. Another contributing factor that we noticed was that men who used to be quite sporty, and then due to ill health or arthritis and certain sort of more debilitating ailments, stopped the sport, but didn't necessarily carry on the social work that happened around the sporting activities. Playing golf in the clubhouse afterwards, didn't go to the clubhouse even though they couldn't play golf anymore. And also the third thing that was a really strong contributing factor was moving to supposedly be near family, but actually a lot of the men saying, you know, my family's busy, I don't see them very often. And actually they were quite isolated, having thought that they were moving somewhere that was going to support them. They really struggled to start again. And hence the mental health issues just became worse and felt very isolated. And of course, the last one was the bereaved men, who often retreated after their wives or partners who had passed away, because it was often, and they admitted that it was the wives or the women that organised the social activity. And men then felt that they needed some sort of boost for their self-esteem and to rekindle that companionship. And that's where our creative conversation groups for older men started, to support men to meet new men and become part of their community again, but also to either rekindle creative activity or even start new things that they'd never done before. So the key things that we did to start to develop this was consultation, as I've said, with GP surgeries, prescribers, Age UK, and also the men's shed. Men's sheds in Wiltshire really supported us, and quite a few of the slightly younger, older men that worked in the sheds or went to the sheds supported our creative conversations groups at the beginning by saying to certain men that they knew in their community, I'm going to go along, so why don't you come with me? And then the men who didn't necessarily, inverted commas, need the creative conversations groups started to filter away once those more sort of vulnerable men felt like they could stay and participate themselves. We definitely said that libraries were the best venues for access and comfort and reliability. Particularly, for example, in Salisbury Library, the staff said we could target the men that come in every week on their own. They sit on their own, they read the newspaper on their own, but they never are seen with anybody else. So they gently sort of pushed the flyers and had chats with them about, would you fancy joining this group? So there was that support there from the libraries hugely. And then once the group started and formed, the groups are 12 weeks long, weekly groups for an hour and a half, led by a professional facilitator. And once the group started after week 1, which we used as a taster and come and try, once people sort of inverted commas signed up, the group's completely free. But the facilitator would work so that the group was tailor-made from the inside out. So it wasn't prescriptive. It wasn't, we are going to do this. It was, what are your interests? Where would you like the creativity of the group to go? And what would you like our themes to be? So we're acknowledging the maturity of those men's life experience, their knowledge, and the creativity that comes with that. So some of the examples of, you know, a huge range of experiences, positivity of things that the men had done in their past, their knowledge, their experience. You know, from one of our facilitators' favorite things is to bring in a load of things from the shoreline and just get people to choose an object and start to talk about it, but also start to creatively talk about it and think about the history of that object and where it's come from, who might have had it, or in historical terms, how it's evolved, how we evolve in relation to the objects. And then even things down to one of the themes that some of the men enjoy is a grand day out, and imagine their ultimate day out, favorite walks in the countryside, and so on. So you can see the list there. Dedicated follower of fashion. We had some great examples of fashion from the ages, and men bringing in things that they can't quite believe that they used to wear, and laughing and joking with each other about their fashion sense through the ages. And as you can see, just on the right there, we, particularly with our Trowbridge group, the man below, Stuart, had a lifelong interest in photography. He had lots of really interesting cameras. And one day he brought those cameras in. The other men were fascinated by it. And so we sort of went with it, and the facilitator for the next few weeks, they took photographs of each other, learning how to use the cameras. And it was an amazing sort of revelation to them of taking the most fantastic photographs of each other that they never thought they could take. Once I saw the contacts, I thought, well, there's an amazing exhibition here. And we got a small charity in Trowbridge to fund. And you can see that we blew them up to huge black and white photographs. And the joy of these photographs are, wrinkles and all, you really get to see the experience and the history in those men's faces. And I'm pleased to say that that has gone on a tour of Wiltshire libraries, but it's currently exhibited in Salisbury Hospital along the corridors. And it really stops visitors and patients and couriers and staff in their tracks looking at all these fantastic black and white photographs of older men. So yeah, just talking a little bit about one of your earlier speakers mentioned about listening in the groups, and that really resonates with our group. The building of trust, the taking turns to speak and to share, the listening, and also the understanding of hearing. A lot of older men, we found, with a reduction in hearing comes a sort of sense of pride of not wanting to admit that they can't necessarily hear so well. And particularly in other contexts, that's another reason why men in our groups have said, well, actually, I stopped going to that because I couldn't hear what was going on. It was too noisy. I didn't feel like I could keep saying, can you repeat that, please? So we really focus on the listening and making sure that everybody is in the right position around the table and they can hear and they respect, but also the listening to not just talk over each other, but actually, because there were some men in our early groups that were so desperate to talk that they didn't actually allow anyone else a chance to talk. So we really sort of developed the ground rules of saying, you have your turn, therefore I have my turn. And those verbal cues of body language and being curious and attentive. I just love this quote. It's amazing from any session. There's so many different viewpoints. I learn something every time because they're so learning from each other. Yeah, things like I've stopped going to things because I can't hear what's being said. Sorry, there's a typo there. This is one of the few spaces I can go without people taking the mick out of me. There was one guy who came to our group who was partially sighted, who had a white stick, and he said that some places that he really just didn't feel comfortable going, but he has the respect and the support of the men around him in this group. Just going to move on a little bit, and I'm just going to hopefully show you. We also recorded a song. The men did a series of songwriting sessions, and again, the men's visibility that I think you've said, other speakers have said, came out in the lyrics that they developed. And never thought that they would record the song. We brought them to the Wiltshire Music Centre recording studio, and some of the men were able to come, and they recorded the song, and it's part of the video of sort of documenting the groups. And their song is called We Are the Grey People. And so I'm just going to play this, and hopefully the YouTube link will work.
Rebecca, we can't hear it. We can see, but we can see the
Okay.
text underneath.
Okay, I don't know if you
Thanks, Rebecca. We couldn't hear the sound, so I will add the link in so everyone can look at that afterwards. I'll put it in the chat.
All right, thank you, thank you. So yeah, just to connect in some of the feedback with that. So yeah, just particularly bereavement. It can be a lonely life living as a widower in this village. I don't see many people. Through these sessions, I've met others I never knew, but lived just around the corner. Because it is a very hyper local thing. Some of the small towns in Wiltshire and even some of the villages that we've worked in, we've just discovered, particularly the men who've moved there from out, various other places in the country. I love the one at the bottom, getting out of bed. This group reminds me that I'm glad to be alive, reminds me I am alive, that I'm able to make it along each week. I can listen to views. It's amazing, the variety of interpretations on an item we discuss. Through our evaluation, just some of the highlights that have brought in topics that men can relate to. They're more at ease talking to men about certain topics, because we wanted to find out what happens in a men-only group. Why are we doing a men-only group? One of the men says, you don't need to mind your P's and Q's. Men's groups tend to compromise of baby boomer participants. So there is a shared cultural and social history, similar interests that are relatable to other men. And what they particularly said, that they didn't like going, or they didn't want to attend chat cafes, anything with the word chat in. The men that we were working with said that sort of scared them off. but things that really got down to the nitty-gritty and discussion. What they also said was that focusing on a particular topic or theme or art form really supported them, and I think this is the same with all the groups that we've talked from today, that they didn't feel that they had to go and just talk about how they were feeling, but through the activity that they were doing, the feelings came out. And then there was that sense of camaraderie, and through the creative activity, the other men then supported them through explaining how they felt. And then they'd find that everybody else was then validating how they felt, and the creative activity supported them to actually feel really positive and to develop those feelings further in the creative work that they were doing. And how the group has had a positive effect on people. Yeah, I've just mentioned about the chat, and friendship, particularly for those living alone, and refiring interests in the arts. It's made me think more. My brain is active. We read prose and poetry in the group, which I haven't done since school, and I enjoy this very much. I found it absolutely fascinating when I went to evaluate with the men's groups, because we have a male facilitator. But when I went to evaluate and said, what things would you like to continue with? Because we try and support the groups to continue when our funding has run out for that particular group so that they continue, but they facilitate themselves. They all said that they wanted to keep the prose and poetry reading, which surprised me hugely, because at the beginning they didn't like doing it, but they found that that really felt their voices were clearer, their voices were being used, particularly the men with health conditions such as Parkinson's. They don't use their vocal cords so well, but they found that when they were reading prose and poetry, it started to improve and they felt more empowered and stronger. And it then helped them in everyday life to actually project themselves and to speak louder. Yeah, and an evaluation about what was most valuable about attending the group. Again, similar sort of things, but also the non-judgmental and being allowed that free discussion. So that's some of our creative outcomes that allowed us to apply to the Arts Council for the grant that we have currently for 2026. To not only attend the groups, but actually to produce creative outcomes that we've realised are worthy of or positive for the groups to actually share with the general public. At the beginning of this journey, a lot of the men would have said, no, I don't have anything to offer. I don't have anything to share or present with the general public. Now, the validation, the self-esteem and the recognition of their creativity has allowed them to say, yes, I want to share these. And I think the black and white photographs really show, because the men obviously had to give their consent to be blown up as huge photographs and, you know, really show their true colours in those photographs. And they're proud of the fact that they've been on tour, and the reaction has been amazing. So what are we doing currently? We're developing new groups in Westbury, small town, market town in Wiltshire, and developing the Trowbridge group further with the Arts Council funding. The Westbury men are in the process of writing poetry and prose, particularly focusing on loss and bereavement, facilitated by these two artists and writers. And they are going to be shared in an exhibition and hopefully a poetry and prose reading that will be in the local library for participants and for general public. They've also in the process of writing a song, and it's going to be recorded next week with singer-songwriter Bob Heath. And again, that has an element of men's visibility, older men's visibility in the lyrics. And we really hope that we're going to develop another photography exhibition with the Trowbridge men this autumn. So that's it for me. I'll stop sharing, hopefully.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca.
No problem.
It was really, really useful, and very, as some of the comments said, it's It was impactful, scalable, and really practical advice. So thank you so much. And we've got some questions as well. I know we're short of time, so I'm going to quickly read some of these questions. And if there is no time, perhaps we can follow this up as well afterwards. But we have so Rebecca from Des Hewitt. Do any of your ideas, approaches linked to the NHS employment, Department for Employment, etc., and as there could be lots to learn from life transitions? That's one. Oh, I think I've lost Rebecca. Can follow that up. Oh, she's just coming back into the meeting room. Hello, Rebecca. Can you hear?
Sorry, yeah, I do apologise. I disappeared for a minute because I clicked on the wrong link and
Don't
shut
worry.
myself off.
No,
I might be in there twice now, but sorry, I lost my link when I shut down.
No
Can you just
worries.
repeat the question? Sorry.
It was, do any of your ideas and approaches link to the NHS, Department for Employment, etc.? Because there could be so much to learn for life transitions.
Yes, no, it's great. We do work closely, obviously, with GP surgeries, and yeah, but I think we haven't necessarily gone down the route of actual discussion with NHS yet, but it's still quite a small project, I think. So that is a potential, yes, definitely.
Yeah, I think David also had some good questions. I'm just quickly as well stating, he, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but you mentioned about is there a preference for men only as opposed to mixed gender groups? And that cuts across all of the presentations today.
That is interesting, because when we've had older women who've walked past a men's group in a library and then gone to the library manager and say, why is that a men only group? That's not fair. So then we've had to discuss that with the reasons why we've just chosen to do a men only group. But then, of course, we have got our mixed creative conversation groups, and some of the Arts Council funding is going towards mixed groups around the county. We've just got 3 specifically men only groups. So yeah, it's a very interesting one.
That is very interesting. And then also there's a question from David about, does the same go as well for facilitators, the artists themselves? Is there a preference, or is there a greater take up if the practitioner is an older male or just a male practitioner?
So when we first started the men's creative conversations groups, we worked with only a male facilitator. But actually, as it's worked out with the project that we're doing this year, we brought a female writer in because we asked the men how they felt about that, and they were very happy to have a female facilitator. And so it is a mix of facilitators now.
Oh, thank you.
And I think that's more for the skill level of the facilitator than the gender.
Yeah, I can imagine. Sorry, I'm conscious of the timing because it's midday, and we've got, I think most, yes, people have to dash off, but we've got so many, Rebecca, and for all our speakers, we've had so many positive comments, and I'd love to be able to share the chat. So if you can, there's lots of people who have dropped their emails, feel free to share, and also feel free to use our place-based creative aging peer learning website as well, because we have a news feed, so anything you want to share on there, that would be fantastic. And so that's events, or drop each other a line on the network. And I'm just going to close that, quickly share. We have an event coming up. I'm going to bring that up there. Upcoming. See if we can do it very quickly. Speed. There. Show current site. Quickly, just so you can see this. This is our next event, which will be after the summer break, and it's really, I think David mentioned it, alluded to it, but it's a report on the creativity. It's a desk-based piece of research on the evidence review for creativity in care homes. there's it's really interesting, and some of it's surprising information as well about art forms which have further evidence than others. So I encourage you to read it there. It's on our Arts Council website, and it's also on the Creative Aging Peer Learning Programme website as well. So you can just tap onto that. And I was trying to see if we can send you a link as well. And then the event is on the 17th of September at 10. So I encourage you to come along. And that is it. I'm going to stop sharing. And for those that can, because we love data as well, I'm talking about the evidence review, I'm going to share. Thank you very much. Just share a very simple quiz, and that sounds more exciting than it actually is, our survey. So there should be a few multiple choice questions. And I'd like to thank all the speakers. They've been so inspirational. It's been a jam-packed morning, it really has. And we thank you for coming along, and also to Shelley and Paul for doing an awesome job in interpreting the whole session. And lastly, this session has been recorded, which reminds me to press the stop record button now. And we will have a link to the recording from next week. So